Saudi Arabia, the largest petrodollar state on this planet, is standing at the crossroad, staring at the looming crisis. And that looming crisis is because of the climate change. Not directly, because most of the countries, not most, but all the countries in this world today is facing that crisis. But Saudi Arabia is special. It's special because it is a petrodollar state, which means most of its revenue or its economy is reliant on oil and gas, on fossil fuel, the leading cause of climate change. There's a fundamental shift in the global economy, and that fundamental shift is coming from decarbonization effort by most of the countries and the policy toward energy transition. What that means is that the policymakers, the government, and the consumers are trying to move away from the usage of fossil fuel because it is generating a lot of greenhouse gases, the leading cause of global temperature rise. IEA is predicting that the total oil and gas uses, the total oil demand, for example, which is standing at 100 million barrels a day today in 2023, is going to decline steeply. And by 2030, that demand of which is 100 million barrels a day today would reduce to like 90 or 92 million barrels a day by 2030. And by 2050, the demand would drop to 50 million barrels a day, almost like 50% of the current level, which is massive. That is, if that stands true, that means Saudi Arabia will lose like 50% of its annual income. And that will have a severe consequence on its economy. Not just on its economy, but it will impact its society, its politics, and its strategic interest in the area. We can all agree or disagree with what IEA is predicting. For example, OPEC, which is the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, they are disputing that the decline in oil demand will not come so fast. They are saying that at least until 2045, the demand would sustain. They think that oil and gas would still be used and we still need it, and therefore there is no need to worry. They are saying that not until 2045 the demand is going to fall. S&P, which is Standard and Poor's, they are saying that in their base scenario, oil demand is going to actually increase in the near term. So currently we are at 100 million barrels a day. That demand would increase to 110 million barrels by 2030 instead of declining. And soon after 2030, it will start declining slowly. And by 2050, that demand would still be around 100 million barrels. So different organizations have different outlook. But one thing is very common, and that is the oil and gas demand is going to decline. So sooner or later, all the petrodollar states, and of which Saudi Arabia is a prominent one, is going to see a massive reduction in its annual income because their economy is so much dependent on oil and gas. They will be the one who will have to face severe consequences unless they diversify their economy. In the near future, we will be seeing that the energy is coming not from the fossil fuel but from the electricity. There's a trend toward electrifying most of the things, even the transportation system, which relies on internal combustion engine, which means petrol and diesel, will give way to electric vehicles. And once that happens, then naturally the demand for oil and gas would reduce. Because of this, that sooner or later the demand for oil would reduce, the consumption for oil will reduce, and Saudi Arabia will have to face the music if they do not change their course right now. And I think they understand it very well. And that's why MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, has been trying to take his country away from radicalism toward modernization. He has a vision for his country, which was published in 2016, called Vision 2030. And he's trying to modernize the economy. He's trying to move away from oil-based economy towards something else, a more sustainable, more modern, not just economy-wise, but also he's trying to bring changes in his own society. For example, he has given few rights to the women folk, which were never heard of in a country like, in a radical country with a very orthodox society. And it is not because MBS is progressive. I mean, he is progressive, or he may be progressive, but it's because it's necessity. If he does not do it, then Saudi Arabia is doomed. Imagine what will happen when they have, I mean, currently Saudi Arabia's annual income, the government's annual income is contributed majorly by oil and gas revenue. Like 80% of the kingdom's revenue is coming from oil export. 80%. 40% of their GDP is contributed by oil and gas sector. That itself tells you how much dependent they are on oil and gas. And in Saudi Arabia, the kingdom is subsidizing the living standard of its citizen. It is providing free education, subsidized housing. There is no tax in Saudi Arabia. But in return, the people have limited civil rights, and the human rights condition in country is appalling. And the people are still living there without raising a voice. That is until the day when these subsidies are taken away. And when there is no oil and gas revenue to subsidize the citizen, then there will be a problem. I'm sure many will start raising their voice against the kingdom. And that is a scenario which is not good, neither for the kingdom, for the rulers of these Middle Eastern countries, but also for the neighboring people. So there will be two things which will happen. First, they will lose their revenue, and they will be unable to support their population. I'm expecting a huge civil unrest. The only reason that civil unrest is not happening is because their life is being subsidized. The second thing, and which will have a very severe consequences on the kingdom's ability to rule its people, is the direct intervention of United States. Currently, you have Qatar, you have Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. Many of these countries have United States Army base in those countries. Saudi Arabia had signed a deal with America whereby Saudi Arabia would provide oil and United States will provide security to its king in return. Once there is no need for oil and gas to United States, I mean, United States already is self-sufficient in its energy, and it is still providing its security cover to Saudi Arabia because it do not want its partners to have because it does not want the energy security taken away from its partners and allies in the European nations. That's why it is still providing that security cover to Saudi Arabia and many other countries in that region. Once the need for oil and gas is taken away, which will happen very soon, if not in 5 to 10 years, then definitely in 25 to 30 years, then there will be no need for USA and its allies to provide the security cover to the royals of this country. And then what will happen? If there's no security cover, no security guarantee, then these countries, the autocrats or the dictators, whatever you want to call them, will no longer be able to control their own population. And secondly, there is a big rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran and many other countries jostling for power between themselves, between Shia and Sunnis. So when there is no security provider, no mediator, then this region would no longer be peaceful as it is now. And therefore it makes sense for the other neighboring countries and the other global power to make sure that there is no such scenario happening in the future. What they should do is they should provide financial and technological know-hows to these petrodollar states so that they can smoothly transition from a heavily dependent oil and gas economy to a more diversified economy. Look at Dubai. I mean, they were relying on oil and gas revenue up to 50%. And today, because of the modernization of their own economy, the oil and gas is contributing only 1% of Dubai's GDP. The rest 99% is coming from real estate, from finance, from tourism, from being a hub of import and export. And I think Saudi Arabia should do the same. Saudi Arabia actually is already trying to do that, but it's a slow process. I mean, Saudi Arabia is already trying to follow that path, and if it is dedicated to achieve that goal, it may be able to wean itself from oil and gas based economy to a more sustainable, more diversified economy, just like Dubai. So folks, that's all for today. I'll be looking forward to your comments and views. And if you think you have benefited in any way, then please do like and share this video.